back to another episode of Beyond the Stable. Today I have an amazing guest. Her name is Lily Chandler.
Ooh.
You've definitely seen her on probably TikTok and Instagram. Your social media presence is amazing and your content is amazing as well.
Thank you.
But you don't just do social media, you also do show jumping. You are a show jumper, and then you also have like sales liveries and everything else on the side. You're a very, very busy person.
Yeah.
So I am super excited to dive into it all and speak to you about absolutely everything. So I'm thinking if we start right at the beginning and speak about how you got into horses.
Absolutely. So I don't come from a horsey family. My mum just stuck me. She was one of those parents that wanted me to have a club every day after school. So I get on the school minibus. They had like a little riding school club, so you'd go and have a lesson like on a Thursday night after school. So I just literally learnt in a riding school from when I was about like 5 or 6 years old. Just got plonked on like the old pony that never moved, so it was on like this big fat cob, and I just, much to my parents' dismay, riding was my favourite thing of all the things I did. So I got into horses literally just through the riding school, and I remember when my mum bought me my first pony, she wasn't horsey, and she just saw a picture of him and he was really cute, and we went and saw him, and I couldn't get him into trot, and she said, yep, we'll have him. And he was a 4-year-old 12-2 Welsh pony, so he'd only just been backed, and he wouldn't trot with me. And she thought, well, he's really cute, so we'll just have him. And I think I learned a lot with him. I mean, I got bucked off nearly every time I rode him. I was like crying every lesson. I think it builds character.
That's why you've got such a good seat now.
Yeah, it builds emotional strength for sure. But actually, I learned so much with him. I had him like 5 or 6 years. Literally up until like I couldn't ride him anymore because I was so tall, because although he was like the devil spawn when I first got him, he was actually like a really cool little pony, because although he put me through it, he was never unsafe about it. It was always just like a cheeky buck off, like, oh, down she goes. And it was because I wasn't a very experienced rider. I just get flung very easily.
And what did you do with him? Did you compete him at all?
No. So I think the most we did was like clear round, cross poles. He wasn't like the most talented jumper in the world, but I did like my first cross country on him, which was literally just like logs on the floor. Couldn't get him through the water, but he was just like the typical epitome of a Welsh pony, like so much sass and opinion, but he was so cute. And he was called Sky, and I've named one of my dogs after him as well, because he just the same year I got my border collie who's called Sky, he passed away, and I'd kept in touch with him, and he lived until his 20s, and he was an old boy, and he was in a riding school towards the end, and apparently he was better behaved with them than he was with me, so someone sorted him out along the way. So I named my dog after him because he was a very special pony for me. I didn't actually start competing until I was a teenager.
Okay, so once you sold your little Welsh D, then what happened?
I got a 13-2, another Welsh, because we thought Welshes were the way to go. They're not, by the way. They're definitely spicy ponies, but we didn't really know anything at the time. So we kept the horses at our local horse rescue centre. So what I'd do is I'd help out at the rescue in exchange for like livery, basically. And when I got my second pony, I didn't have him very long, because I got him from a dealer who missold him to us, and he was a bolter. And he absolutely terrified me. He would just take off, and he would do laps and laps of the arena, and I'd be like sobbing and crying and just holding on, and someone would have to come out and grab his rein to stop him.
I actually think bolters is the most scariest
I
thing.
still don't like bolters. I think he scarred me for life. But I mean, through having horses and further down the line, more bad experience with dealers is kind of what made me want to do what I do now. But that was my first bad experience with the dealer, with my second pony. But we did find him a really nice home. And then the most significant pony I ever got was my little 14-hand Connemara called Crystal, who's been like the most iconic little pony on social media. She's the one that started off the social media journey. I got her when I was 11, and I actually bought her myself. So she was the first pony I ever bought myself. And that was because I did a really random Disney advert, and I got like my mum would put me in like acting stuff as
Yeah.
a child. And for some reason I landed a role for Disney, which
Oh my
was
God, that's
really,
cool.
really random. Just for like a Disney Infinity like video game. And I got this job and they paid me £3,000 for it.
What age were you at this point?
11. Yeah, so
That's
they paid
so
me
cool.
£3,000 and that's what I paid for Crystal. And I bought her with all of that money. And when my mum said, oh, what do you want to spend the money on? Because obviously at 11 years old, most kids were like blow it on loads of toys and stuff. I was like, I want another pony. Because I'd just been like scarred for life from this 13-2 that we'd sold. And I kind of had decided I didn't want to ride. But then having had the break and I had this little lump of money, I thought, I really want to get back into riding again. And we bought Crystal. And the best thing about Crystal was when I first tried her, because obviously people have seen her on social media, they've seen her rearing, they've seen us galloping round, like she looks like slightly crazy. But actually, when I first bought her, I was a nervous wreck. Like, I just wanted a happy hacker. I didn't want to ever jump, wasn't interested in competing. I just wanted a pony I could like walk down the road on and feel safe. So we bought Crystal and she was this fat, hairy Connemara. And the reason I actually bought her was because when I was trying her, we were next to a turnout field of horses and the horses all started galloping round and I had flashbacks of this last pony I had and I was thinking I'm about to get bolted with. And Crystal just stood there and just watched the horses galloping around. She stood there calmly and I thought, I'm having this one.
Sold.
This one is mine. Didn't do anything. I walked around the arena and I said, this one, I'm having it. And we took her home the next day. We didn't bet her, nothing. We didn't do bettings back in those days. And that was literally me sold on her. I was like, yeah, this is a perfect pony for me. She just stood still. She was fat and lazy. I was like, this is exactly what I need. And I think the first month or two, I would not ride her off the lead rein. I was terrified. And she was an angel. Like, she never did anything wrong.
And your mum not being from a horsey background, was she helping you out during this time?
She did her best. She dropped me at the yard. Go do the pony and then she'd take me home again. My dad started to get a bit more involved at this point.
Yeah.
He was also like terrified of horses when I was younger. But he's been like trained into being my groom now. But yeah, he started to get more involved. He was like my leader for Crystal. He'd lead round. He didn't know anything about horses, so he'd like do it kind of wrong. But we'd clip the lead rope on the bit and he'd just walk me round. And it would make me feel safe. And then I started just building up to the point of riding her off the lead rein, going for little hacks. And I remember when I did my first jump on her, because I'd sworn up and down I'd never jump again. I wasn't interested in jumping. And we did like those little blocks that are like 90 centimetres. We did a cross pole at the top of the blocks. And I was like, oh, I just jumped across the top of the blocks. It was like a big deal. And I just was pootling about on her, getting my confidence right up until I was about 13, 14. And she'd really built my confidence. We'd gone and done a bit of pony club, did like camps and stuff. And the instructors had tried to convince me to jump. And I was always like flat out refused. I wouldn't jump. Or like if they made me do a crossbow, I'd like cry afterwards because it would be so stressful. But I eventually built up to going and doing my first proper show, which was the 50 centimetre clear round. And I just remember being so nervous, literally nearly being sick because I was so nervous. I was in tears. I said to my dad after warming up, Crystal had been perfect, she did nothing wrong. I said, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go in and do it. He said, just jump fence one. And if you don't want to do it, come out again. Yeah. So I went in, I jumped fence one. I said, oh, okay, we did that. I jumped fence two. I thought, okay, it's going all right, jump fence three. And I ended up doing the whole course. And I was literally so happy. She was like the best pony in the world for just having trotted around the 50 centimetre. I just felt like on top of the world. And it went from there, really. She was just the absolute turning point in like my confidence as a rider. Like, she's done everything for me. I'd never be doing what I do now, riding the horses I do now, if it hadn't been for Crystal. Because like I said, I wasn't interested in jumping. I never wanted to compete. I was a nervous wreck. Like, I would cry every time someone brought up the idea of jumping. Like, it would just be awful. So to go from that, jumping 50 centimetres on her, eventually she took me around my first B100. Like, she's just like the best pony in the world. I could talk about her all day. I could honestly talk about her all day. She's the best pony in the world. And she's got home for life with me now. She's 19. She's nearly 20 now. And she's retired, living the best life in the field. But I've had her for 11 years. She's just my best friend. I love her to pieces. But after Crystal, because she built my confidence up so much, I think I was about 16 or 17 when we'd planned for me to get a horse.
Yeah.
We never wanted to get rid of Crystal, but it was kind of, I was a bit tall on her. Like, we're thinking, everyone around me was saying, oh, you should be moving on to horses at this age. Now, if it had been up to me, I wouldn't have done it. I would have just stayed on Crystal longer. But the standard when you're like 16 is you're meant to move off ponies and go on to horses. That's what you're meant to do. And I did get like pressurised a bit into it, and I kind of just followed along. The yard I was at was a show jumping yard. And although I didn't at the time compete very big, I was jumping maybe 80, 90 at the time. They said, oh, it's time for you to move on to a horse and then you'll jump bigger. And at the time I kind of thought, well, I don't really want to jump bigger, but I meant to move on to horses, so I did. And we bought a horse from a dealer, and it was an awful situation. I mean, we'd gone and tried it. I think they definitely took advantage of the fact that we didn't know what we were doing. Still at this point, my dad was with me. He's not horsey. I was a teenager, didn't really know the red flags to look out for. So I went and tried this horse. The dealer that was riding it in the viewing fell off, and I still bought the horse. What was I thinking? So it stopped at a fence and spun the dealer off. And I just said, oh, she never normally does that. Do you still want to get on? And I was like, yeah, why not?
She doesn't normally.
I believed them. I said, oh, horses have off days. I was always a bit of a soft touch. Horses have off days. They're animals. They are, but yeah, shouldn't have got on it. Anyway, I got on her. They put the fences down like half the height he was jumping. So the horse was jumping around great with me, popping around 80. And I just thought, oh yeah, I don't need to jump big. Like, I'll take time, get to know the horse first. And we said to them, we really like her. And they said, well, we're actually going on holiday for the next 3 weeks. So if you want her, you need to take her home tomorrow, and you can just get her vetted at your yard. And at the time we thought, oh, great, that's so kind of them. So we paid for the horse, and they said, oh, if it fails the vetting, we'll just refund you and take the horse back. We paid for the horse. It's saying it now, you just think, how could you have been so stupid? But
at the time, in the moment, like,
and we just
and being so
trusted
young,
them. We just trusted them. We thought, at the time there wasn't such thing as Dodgy Dealer's Facebook page or anything like that. You just trusted people. Oh, these people sell horses for a living, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
We took the horse home. A day after I got her home, she was absolutely crippled lame. And I just thought, oh God, what have I done? Because I rode her the day she got home. Just schooled her in the arena, walked trot, a bit of canter, didn't do a lot. And then the next day the horse was fat legs, crippled lame. I'm thinking, oh my God, what's happened? We've injured the horse. That's what we thought. And we'd had this vetting booked, and we decided to go ahead. And I couldn't ride the horse again. I only rode it the one time. And we had this vetting book. The vet came out and he found a long list of issues. The horse had cataracts in both eyes, so it had the potential to be fully blind at some point in its life. It had the very telltale signs of potential kissing spines. Obviously, you can't tell without an X-ray, but she had a very significant clubbed foot. Obviously, we didn't realise that. Sorry. We didn't realise that when we tried her because we didn't know what to look for. And because of the clubbed foot and the angle of it was slightly turned outwards, it put a lot of pressure on her tendons and ligaments on one of the front legs, which is why she was lame on that leg, and he did suspect a potential tendon or ligament injury that had been covered up for when we tried her. She probably was doped up a bit to get through the viewing and day one, and then it's worn off and she's gone lame again. And then both hind legs had like loads of scar tissue, like probably done both suspensories. It was just a disaster, basically. The horse was completely screwed. And we rang the dealer and we said, oh, really sorry, it's failed the vetting. Can we please send the horse back and have our money back? And the dealer said, absolutely not. That's happened since it's been at your yard. You've injured the horse. We're not taking it back. Like, this is your fault. We kind of thought, oh my God. And our yard owner at the time kind of explained to us, this was probably planned.
Yeah.
They probably planned this to try and get rid of this horse, and now you're a bit stuck. We kind of went, oh my God, like, we spent all our money on this horse. We couldn't afford to get another one. So we tried to take it through a court case, and eventually the dealer ended up convincing us to accept a partial refund instead of taking it through the court. I wished we'd taken it through the court, because that was such a telltale sign that they knew they weren't going to win this case, because we had enough evidence to show that that they'd basically done us over. And we got a partial refund. We got £2,000 back, which was nothing. And we were stuck with a very broken horse. So we tried to rehab her for 6 or 7 months, because I was really attached to her. She was a lovely personality on the ground, and I felt this like responsibility, because we'd bought her, to look after her. And she never quite came right, and we ended up rehoming her as a broodmare. And now looking back at the time, knowing what I do now, I wouldn't have rehomed that horse as a broodmare, because she had so many problems conformationally that you wouldn't really want to breed from something like that. But at the time, again, we were learning from the people around us, and my yard owner said, you just have to rehome it, give it to somebody as a broodmare for free. So what we did was, the person that we gifted this mare to said, we have a horse, if you would like to do a swap. And this horse is just a thoroughbred, you can ride him. And at the time I just thought, well, I've got a really broken horse, and these people are offering me a horse that can be ridden.
Can't get much worse.
So
you'd hope.
well, you'd think it would be. Well, at least he could be ridden. So I just said, yeah. I saw like one picture of him going over like a 70 centimetre fence, and I said, yes, let's do it. Let's swap the horses. So he went, dropped her off, and when we picked him up, he came out the stable, and he was just a rack of ribs. Like, he looked a state, and I just thought, oh my God, I can't even turn him down now, because I have to get him out of here. Like, I have to take this horse away. And they said, oh, he's only just come in, like, we've not had him very long. And what they said to me is, oh, we know he's got a bit under-muscled. And I was thinking, it's a bit more than under-muscled, it's an RSPCA case. But at the time, you know, I kind of believe them are, you know, he's only just come in, we've not got the weight on him yet, So we took him. And later I found out that they'd had the horse a fair amount of time, and that's just a whole other thing of... He ended up being basically a rescue case for us, but we took him home, and he was called Merlin, and people on social media that followed me back then will know him, because he had a really unique way of jumping. He'd like jump with Superman legs, like that Shallow, that show jumper that jumps at the top level with his legs like that. My little thoroughbred used to jump like that, and that's how he also picked up a bit of a social media following, because of his little Superman legs. He'd like jump over every fence like this. But he was my first proper horse, and you know, for your first horse, you kind of want something that's going to teach you. And he was just so difficult. Bless his heart. For months and months, I didn't ride him just because we were putting weight on him. And then at the time, I'd only ever really properly learnt from Crystal, who was very ponyish, never really learnt how to school a horse properly. So Merlin was like a huge challenge, because he was this big 16'2" thoroughbred that was like gangly, and also once he put the weight on, he got so much more energy and spark, that he wasn't this quiet little thing that he used to be. He had like a lot about him now, and I was like, this is kind of scary actually. This horse has quite a bit about him. And I did actually learn a lot from Merlin. I remember when I used to do like arena eventing on him, because he would never leave enough fences up to do a full course of show jumps. He'd like clear the first few, and then that was it. We were bashing the rest. So I thought, I'll do arena eventing, because the first half is show jumps and the rest are cross country jumps, so maybe we've got a chance of going clear. And I remember in the entire time I had him, I had one clear round, and I had him like a year and a half. And in that, I remember when we got that one clear round, it was like the best day ever. In like the 90 centimetre. It's like everyone, all my friends were there. We were all cheering because Merlin had gone clear. Everyone at that venue probably thought, what the hell are they doing? They're like screaming like I'd won Hoys. It's because Merlin had gone clear. We were so happy. But he was an awesome little horse, and I ended up selling him to a girl that had him right up until the day he passed away. She was an amazing home for him. He was a very special boy though, because he was cold-backed. So if anyone that doesn't know what cold-backed is, sometimes if a horse is cold-backed when you first get on them, it can be varying degrees of severity, but they can put their back up. Some horses can bronc, some horses can properly rodeo you, some horses can take off, but it's normally just for the first couple of minutes of riding them, and then they settle down. So it's just described as cold backed, because when you first get on them, the back is cold and they can react to it. So he was cold-backed, which made it quite difficult to sell him.
Yeah.
And I had disclosed this because I wasn't going to be like the dealers that I'd been screwed over by. And it was quite tricky finding the right person for him. We'd had a couple of viewings where he'd wronged people off the minute they'd sat in the saddle, because even if I'd warmed him up first, he was a bit picky about who rode him. So if somebody new got on him and sat down a bit heavily, he'd go, no, goodbye, you're on the floor. So we'd eventually found this like lovely girl to take him, and I'm still in touch with her now. She's great. She had Merlin for the rest. After Merlin, again, I wasn't doing much competing, so at this point I'm like nearly 17, 18, and I'd still not really done any affiliated competing or anything like that. So it's quite a late bloomer as far as competing goes. And I got a lovely little coloured horse called Inky, which lots of people on social media know about because I do all my team chasing on him. And he did my first proper BS shows. Like, he took me round British novice discovery level competitively, won my first few classes. Like, for me, that was such a huge deal to be like placing, jumping clear. Like, oh, that was a treat, jumping clear. And he was just the best like BS starter horse for me. He had jumped up to newcomers. I never jumped 110 on him. At the time I wasn't really ready to. And we eventually switched to doing team chasing and hunting. And he really, like Crystal, he was another core horse through the journey of like building my confidence, because even through all of these horses, I'd always been a very naturally nervous rider. I think from the start, I had a bad start to horses. Yeah. So I was like naturally nervous about everything I did. I'd have like really bad anxiety attacks before I'd go in the ring. My dad would have to talk me into carrying on. Like, I'd warm up and then go, I'm actually not going to jump this round. I'm like, I'm going to be sick. I can't do it. And he'd have to like psych me up into getting me to compete. And Inky was like a huge turning point again for me, like competition wise, to build my confidence and have me just like enjoy competing rather than find the whole experience like stressful. I actually would get to a competition and not feel like I was going to be sick. Like, I was like, I'm on Inky, like, it's okay. So he was great for me doing that. I only sold Inky recently. He had navicular disease, so we ended up slowing down his workload, and I tried to loan him out, and it was just a disaster. The lady that loaned him, because he had navicular, he had to be barefoot, and that's when I started learning all about barefoot and the benefits of that. And for him, it was the only thing that kept him sound, barefoot. And I had gone through a huge process of finding the right loan home for him, vetting loads of people, visiting yards, like trying to find the perfect person for him. And I thought I'd found that, and then little did I know, 2 weeks into having him, she put shoes on him without telling me. And then there was a photo that she'd sent me of them on a pleasure ride, and I zoomed in. I was like proper stalker mode. I zoomed in down to his feet, and I was like, hold on.
They weren't there before.
I was like, got shoes on. And I even gave her a full set of hoof boots to wear for hacking.
Yeah.
Like, you know, here you go. You've got the whole setup for barefoot, feed, everything. His feet were great. I was like, hold on, what's this I see here? And I rang her up and I said, I think he got shoes on, because she had asked me when she first took him home, can I put shoes on him? And I'd said no. And I explained why. And she'd done it anyway.
It's crazy how people can just...
And I said to her, you do understand you're risking his soundness.
Yeah.
And I said, you have to bring him home. I'm sorry.
And he's only on loan to you. He's not yours. You can't just do what you want.
I said, if she'd bought him and she wanted to put shoes on, then she's going to find out the hard way that doesn't work for him. But he's still my horse.
He's mine. What are you doing?
Like, okay. And she even signed a contract. Anyway, you know, I just said, bring him home.
Yeah.
I don't want the fuss. I don't want the faff. I don't want the drama. Bring him home.
Yeah, and now you don't trust her now
anyway.
No,
there's no way she was going to keep him. No. So she brought him home. That was that. That was my very short experience at loaning horses, and I don't think I'll be doing it again. But yeah, so He was an awesome horse. He's in a wonderful home now. I found him a lovely home. He was getting to the point where, although he was loving his team chasing, and he took me around my first hunt race, which was absolutely terrifying. It's like a group of, you got like a pack of like 60 riders, and it's all one big race across the country. No, like, team chasing is a good fun. I enjoyed that. The hunt racing is just a step too far to me. It was all like people point to pointer thoroughbreds, flat out. I was sitting at the back on my little 15-1 coloured Irish horse. I was like, no, this is it. I'm going to pootle round and then I'm never doing this again. It was way too scary. But I found him a lovely home with these lovely people that just want like a happy hacker. They have like a barefoot track system at their yard. Like, it's just perfect setup for a horse of his needs with his navicular. They were super educated on his feet and everything. And it was just really special to find him a lovely home. And they still have him now and they'll have him forever. So after him, well, it was Eric really after him, but Eric was part of, like, I'd started doing the sales livery business, and
speak me through that a bit. Like, how did it come about? How did that start?
So through having horses, I'd had the odd project pony. I kind of left those out because they weren't key points in my like riding journey. But I'd had the odd project pony, normally like a Connemara I'd picked up from Ireland or something, like bought it unseen for not very much money. Because a few years ago, you could pick Connemaras up for like £1,000, you know, get them really cheap, have them over, back them, train them, sell them on as kids' ponies. So I used to do that. I used to get like a sweet looking Connemara. I'd always try and get something that people would describe as like lazy and slow, because those are the best types, because it's so much easier to whiz a pony up than to steady one down, especially when you're selling. So I used to do the odd project pony and I would sell them, and then I'd get people coming back saying, have you got anything else? Like, we've bought this pony off you a couple of years ago. Have you got like the next size up? And I'd go, well, not really. I've only got my own horses and I don't want to sell those at the time. So I kept getting people asking me, and then the first ever horse I took in on sales livery, I hadn't started the business yet, was this little pony, and she'd been on a sales livery yard with a professional rider, and she'd been bolting off, another bolter, she'd been bolting off with people, and she put someone through a fence, and it was just all it was a bit quirky. And I knew, you know, friend of a friend sort of thing. They said, oh, you know, you're good with quirky ones. Do you think you could try and sell this pony? I thought, oh, God, okay. And I just thought, you know what, rather than buying a project for myself, let me just take this little one in. So I charged them next to nothing for livery. It was just the one pony alongside my horses. And I had her for about 6 months. I had her for, which is way too long for selling a project. But I managed to get her to a point where she was rideable. And she went hunting, and she was just a phenomenal little jumper. Like, once you'd calmed her down, because she was a bit of a panicker, once you calmed her down, she really, really was a super little pony. Again, another Connemara. I had a really soft spot for Connemaras after Crystals, so I thought, oh, I really like this pony. And then ended up selling her to 2 children, competent riders, but to be able to get her to the point of having been bolted with a professional rider and then rideable for children was like, felt like such an achievement. And I thought, once I'd sold her, I thought I really enjoyed that. That was a really nice process. I really enjoyed doing that. And I enjoyed that her owner was so happy. And I just thought it was a really fun thing to do. So every now and then I started taking on the odd schooling training livery. Again, for like quirkier ponies and stuff. At this point, I was still only really doing like 14-2 ponies. And I just started getting more and more people asking for it.
Yeah.
And I started getting schooling liveries that they wanted me to school, and then they wanted me to sell them at the end of it. They thought, I've got a pony here, it's got a problem, but if you can fix that, can you find it a new home? And that's how I sort of slipped into doing the sales liveries. And because I started getting more people asking for it, we moved off a livery yard onto a little sole use rent yard. Because at that point I was thinking, well, it's not feasible for me to be paying livery when I've got like multiple people coming in for, you know, wanting to send horses in. And at the time I had Crystal and Inky, so I had 2 horses of my own, and it just wasn't like financially viable for me to be paying like livery yard prices for other people's horses. So I ended up finding just a little 5-box sole use yard to rent, not a lot of turnout, just kind of make do, and I started doing the business from there. And
it's such an amazing thing for someone at such a young age to do.
thank you.
Like,
Yeah,
take my hat
so
off to you.
I had always said I never wanted to work in horses. It was never a plan. I never wanted to work in horses. I wanted to keep my horses as my hobby. And then I wanted to go to university and study English. So I was going to go and do English literature. And I was always really into like creative arts and stuff like that. So I never really was interested in doing horses as a job. And then obviously when I started doing these bits and pieces, I kind of thought, well, I'm actually enjoying this a
I'm
bit.
having fun.
And I never thought I would. I thought working in horses would ruin the hobby for me. That's what I always thought. It's what people say a lot. So I thought I'll never do that. And then I got into it a bit and I thought, you know what, I won't go to uni straight away. I'll take a gap year.
Yeah.
And let me just really throw everything into this gap year to see if I can make horses work as a job, like as a proper career, not just making ends meet. Like, will I be making profit? Will it be sustainable living? Like, will I be able to fund myself and my own horses alongside it? So I thought, right, I'll do it. So I just started doing this properly when at this little 5-box yard I rented, when I got sent Eric in. He's my very special boy. And the reason I took Eric was because at that point I didn't have a lot of customers and I would take anything in. And now, if I'd seen the videos they sent me of him, I'd gone, no, I'm not selling that. that horse is a nightmare. I don't want that. But at the time, I needed business. I had to take in whatever I could get. And now I'm very lucky that I can be much pickier about the horses I take in. But back then, I would have taken anything. I'd have taken a donkey on 3 legs and I would have done something with it. So at the time, I remember when I first got sent the first video of Eric, and I had a phone call from them and I had a long conversation. They were telling me all about this horse that they'd bought, and within 2 weeks of buying him, he'd started rearing and he was just a complete nightmare. Like, he was rearing all the time. They'd had him medically checked out. They found out he had ulcers. They treated him and he was still rearing afterwards. She said on the phone, when she called me, she said they just had a flat work lesson. And it rained the whole time and he spent the whole hour just rearing. She said he doesn't like the rain. I thought, well, that's not really a good enough reason for him to do that. She said, but we just can't do anything with him. Like, he goes in the ring, he won't even go over fence 1 and he just stands up. And she said, look, this is not the horse we wanted. For her daughter, they just wanted a nice, experienced schoolmaster, which in some ways he was. Like, he had jumped a lot. He jumped very successfully as a young horse. He did the age classes. Something had gone wrong somewhere along the way because he was very quirky. So she said, we just really need to sell him. And I ummed and ahed about taking him for ages. And I'm so glad I did now, like, looking back. But I nearly didn't take him. Yeah. I just thought, God, this horse is going to be difficult to sell. And also I was thinking, do I want to deal with this? Like, this horse bloody rears all the time. Like, is he going to be safe to ride? Who knows? And I just thought, you know what? I've got empty stables. I'm not earning any money. I'll just take him. And they brought him over, and this was December of 2022. And we'd had snow. So they brought him over, and then I couldn't do anything with him for like 2 weeks. And we were completely snowed and iced in, and the horses didn't get a lot of turnout. And I remember that we were, once the roads had stopped being covered by snow, we were boxing down to a local indoor arena to ride. And I remember boxing him down thinking, oh my God, he's been in the stable for 2 weeks. Like, this horse is going to kill me. And I lunged him for like an hour before I rode him because I thought, I have to be safe. He's going to kill me. And I got on him and he was absolutely angelic. He was so well behaved. And I was so proud of him because obviously he'd spent 2 weeks and not had a lot of turnout. It had been snowed in. Like, he was just so well behaved. And I did some pole work and I did a couple of little cross poles on him. And I said to my dad, and my dad says this all the time now looking back, he said, you turned to me and said, oh, I really like this horse. And it was because even at a cross pole, he'd prop himself up to a fence. He knew exactly what he was doing. And I thought, this horse is actually quite nice. You know, these videos I'd seen of him being an idiot, actually, this horse is quite good. So I did some digging that evening and found loads and loads of pictures of him as a young horse jumping big classes, fox hunters, 130s. And I thought, oh my God, this horse, because I hadn't seen these pictures before. I'd only seen videos of him rearing. I thought, oh my God, he can jump. I was like, okay, this is quite exciting. So the next time we boxed him up again down to this indoor. Arena was still frozen over. We couldn't do anything on it. We were hacking out a bit round the roads just to get the horses fit. And then we boxed up down the indoor to give him a proper jump. And that was the first time he displayed his little behaviour. And he warmed up really well. And then the first fence I asked him to do that had a filler under it. And bearing in mind, this horse had competed internationally.
Yeah.
He was
He'd seen
13
the
years old
fillers.
at this point. He'd seen fillers before. He dropped his shoulder, spun, threw a big buck in, which I managed to stick. And then he kind of went, oh, you're still on. Okay. And that's when the rearing happened. And he would just... He wasn't really trying to get you off. He was more just putting up a tantrum about, well, I don't really want to do that filler, so I'm going to throw all my toys out the pram, and hopefully you'll get off. I think he'd learned that if he reared, you'll get off, and he can go back to bed and eat his hay net. And I just kind of sat there. People have always asked me, oh, what did you do with Eric? Like, how did you change him around? And honestly, I've always said to people, I just sat there and I just waited. I waited for him to finish, and then I'd ask him nicely to carry on, and he'd go, all right then. So I just waited for him to finish his little tantrum, and this is I still have this video now of him just standing in the corner of the arena, just going up and down. And then he stops and goes, oh, okay. And then we come round and he pops the fence, no problem. So he's not scared of fillers. He just kind of picked that. He went, okay, I don't like the look of this, but I'm going to pick this and see what we're going to have with her. And he was definitely a challenge. I spent 6 months on him while they owned him. And during that time, we had got him out competing. We'd had our fair share of rounds where he was just standing in the corner on 2 legs. But normally, if you waited him out, he would then go and jump round for you. And he'd go clear, and then he started winning. And he'd still have a little rear, but then he'd go and jump round and he'd do an awesome round. And people would go, oh, that horse is quite nice. Like, once you get him going, he's all right. I was like, yeah, he is. And I really liked him. And I got him to the point where he was relatively sensible. So 6 months in, we'd done a lot of work. I did a lot of groundwork with him as well. Because with him, he had a real struggle with anxiety. So most of the time, this would come out competing. Because the atmosphere would get to him and he'd get a little bit anxious going in the arena. But once you gave him a job to do, you had his mind focused on something, and you'd more often than not be able to get him to jump round without any fuss. It was normally just first going in the arena, he'd find it all a bit overwhelming and kind of just go, oh my gosh. And doing all that groundwork really helped with him building his own self-confidence and to try and teach him to emotionally regulate like a child. It's literally like gentle parenting a child is dealing with Eric. So he was kind of at the point now where I thought, right, it's time to sell him. Really sad. I was so sad because I loved him. He felt like one of my own. But it was time to sell him. He was at the point where he was jumping double clears. He was winning. He was jumping like 110 level. And he was doing pretty well. He was an angel at home. He was not doing anything naughty at home now. And it was time to start taking viewings for him. So obviously I advertised him on Instagram. Everybody knew Eric was for sale. And I kept getting loads of comments, why don't you buy him? Why don't you buy him? And I just didn't have the money to. Although he was quirky, he was still a horse that had competed to a higher level in the past. Like, he was worth a fair bit. And I just thought, I'm never going to be able to afford a horse like that. So it's out of the question for everyone. I said, there's no way I'm ever going to buy him. I said that on Instagram so many times, and like, look at me now. I said, guys, stop asking these questions because I'm never going to buy him. So I started taking viewings on him, and long story short, he threw off all of his viewings, which was very embarrassing. Especially as, prior to people viewing him, I had shared these quirky videos of him because I just wanted to be honest. I'd posted about it on Instagram. There was nothing to hide. Everybody knew Eric reared. Yeah. Like, it was just, everybody knew. But I'd said to people, he's only really does it competing. Like, he's an angel at home. Anyway, first viewing we do. This lovely girl came. She was really experienced, far more experienced than me, had competed to a quite a decent level on lots of different horses. And she was looking for a horse that she could go out and compete on as more of like a diesel horse to add to her string of horses, because he was an out-and-out winner. He's super quick. Mm-hmm. When you get past the quirks, he'll go and do a lovely round. So I rode him first, and he was good as gold because he was good at home. And then she hopped on him, and he just knew that it was somebody new on him, the little bastard, because she walked him round the arena, and popped him into trot down the bottom end. And as she trotted past the arena gate, so she'd done one lap of the arena, he dropped his shoulder and spun and had her on the floor immediately. I thought, oh God, so embarrassing. And I said, oh, are you all right? She was fine. She wasn't injured. She said, oh, that was a bit naughty. I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry. He doesn't normally do that. And she said, oh, get back on. It's fine. She said, he just caught me off guard. He told me he was quirky. It was all good. She got back on him and asked him to walk on. And he went, no, thank you. And he just started rearing. He wouldn't walk. He wouldn't move. And she rode it really well. But he just stood up and he kept rearing. And he got to the point where he was walking towards the arena gate. And I thought, oh God, he's going to get his legs over the gate. So I had to say, can you just get off? And that was the end of viewing number 1. Super successful. Viewing number 2 was a teenage boy who came and tried him. And really gutsy, like hunting rider, done loads of hunting, quirky ponies all the time. I thought this will be perfect because he was quite petite. And a soft rider, but really, really brave. And I'd spoken to the parents all about Eric's quirks, and I thought this is going to be a great match. I feel like their personalities would be great together. And he got further than this other girl did. He warmed Eric up, he started jumping. I thought, oh, excellent, Eric likes this guy. And then we were right nearly at the end of the viewing, and it had been really successful. And I thought, this is great. They'll absolutely have him. And we popped the fences up one last time for him to jump around in a slightly bigger course. And Eric just had to ruin it. He'd stopped for a bit. We chatted and then we put the fences up. And I think just stopping and switched Eric off mentally. And he came round into fence 1. And Eric wasn't a stopper, but he would spin out of fences if you weren't quite with him. And he did exactly that. He spun out of the fence and this boy sat it, but he got a bit unseated. And Eric took complete advantage and he just kept spinning. He just kept, when like you see the rodeo horses go round, he just did that. And this boy was slowly sliding down the side and he kept spinning until he was on the floor. And I was so embarrassed and I apologised profusely. And they said, oh no, it's okay. We'll chuck him back on, let him pop a fence before we finish. Chucked him back on. Eric said no. It's almost like once you're off, he knows he's won.
Yeah, he can get you off.
So he just started rearing. He wouldn't move. And the rears got bigger and bigger. And I thought the boy looked a little bit worried. So he ended up getting off him. And safe to say, they didn't buy him either. And then the final viewing Eric had was viewing number 3. And they got on him. Again, I'd warmed him up. He'd been super good. They got on him. Started warming him up. It was going well. Eric was in a chilled mood, which was always good. The sun was shining, which means Eric's going to be calm, which is excellent. If it's raining, you normally just don't bother biting Eric. No, he's always in a bad mood if it's raining, but me too. So they'd been warming him up and they went to pop him into canter. And I don't know why he felt the need to do this, but he went up into canter. And as he went into canter, he jumped into it and he threw a big buck. And then straight away from bucking, he slammed the brakes on and just stood straight back. And he flung the girl straight off the back of him. Like she went flying. I was like, oh my God. And I thought, and she landed on her head. And I was like, oh my God, she's going to be injured.
Please don't be hurt.
I was like, oh my God, is she going to be injured? And luckily she was okay. She was a bit, shaken up, but because he was very violent about it. It was absolutely unnecessary behaviour. Really quite embarrassing because he'd been super chilled as well. I think when a horse is a little bit tense from the start, you're kind of more prepared. But if a horse feels really relaxed, he had a speciality about tricking you, lulling you into a false sense of security. So that was Eric's final viewing. After that, I rang up his owner and said, this is going very badly. I said, I don't know how many more people I can take because somebody's going to get injured at some point. And I'm the one selling. And we had this conversation of, she said, I don't know what we're going to do. He has to be sold. Like, we can't have him back. Like, my daughter won't ride him. He's not the right horse for us. Mm-hmm. So I put the phone down, had a little conversation with my dad. And I said, look, we really like Eric. My dad loved Eric. And he wasn't horsey, so it says a lot for him to like a horse. And I said, is there any way we can find a way to buy him? So we had a little discussion. My dad was willing to put forward a chunk of money for me to buy him. And it was less than half of the asking price of what they wanted from him. And I said, there's no way they're going to take this because this is a very, very cheeky offer. But in my defence, the horse was practically unsellable because he said, Eric decided he was staying because he was throwing off everybody else. And I think they got to the point, we made this very cheeky offer and I said, there's no way they're going to take this. But I think they got to the point where they were so sick of this bloody horse.
Yeah.
They just said, have him, please, take him away. But they're really lovely people and they keep up with Eric even now. And it's really nice that his previous owners, obviously he was absolutely horrible to them. He put them through hell. But they're so genuinely happy for me and Eric to have success. And I think not a lot of people would be like that. Some people would be a little bit bitter about the fact that he'd gone well with me and not with them. But they're so, so lovely and supportive. And they keep up with him even now. And it's so nice. But yeah, that's how I acquired Eric. And I was fully aware when buying him. Well, that's not true. I was going to say I was aware I was never going to sell him. And that's not true because I thought I can turn this horse around and my goal was to try and qualify for him for the Bronze League at Hoys. And I thought, if we qualify Hoys, I'll sell him after that. And then a few more months in, I thought, I'm never selling this horse. He's my best friend. And I was a bit delusional anyway, because nobody was going to want him, even if I had wanted to sell him. So luckily, I came to my own conclusion that I was going to keep Eric forever. Which, yeah, nobody would have taken him. I think I'd have to pay somebody to take Eric. Because I think everybody sees him online and they think, oh, Eric looks fun. But then they'd come and try him and he'd be like, no.
Yeah.
He's so naughty. But yeah, I still have Eric now. He's my best boy in the whole world. And he, again, taught me so much. Like, going back to the riding journey of, like, core horses, he's definitely one that's taught me. After Crystal, Eric's taught me the most out of all of them. He's really developed my self-confidence to be able to work with him and learn about him, and he really taught me how to really ride. Like, Crystal, I think, developed my confidence and she held my hand, whereas Eric didn't hold my hand. I was grabbing for his hand, going, please, Eric, please. But he taught me so much. And I think thanks to Eric is why I can now do this properly as a job.
Yeah.
Because he was far from easy, but he really taught me how to ride properly. He taught me how to correctly school a horse, which, again, up until that point, I hadn't really ever learned how to correctly do that. I didn't have a lot of lessons growing up riding. Like, I learned in a riding school, and then after that, it was kind of on my own. I've not had horsey parents around me to, like, guide me. So I've been mostly self-taught, which leads room for a lot of bad habits. So it was with Eric that, I sought out the training to help with him, where I learned how to actually the fundamental basics of schooling a horse, proper training. And that's what's helped me now. Like, I get a lot of young horses sent in. It helps me so much to be able to have those fundamental basics that I didn't learn for so many years. He's the one that taught me all of that. And actually, for a show jumper, he's really, really lovely on the flat. He's taught me lots of lateral work. We've even, like, dabbled in a bit of dressage, every now and then. So I really think that, for people that show jump, flat work is the core to everything. And that's just, it's so interesting to see how before I never realised how much your flat work could improve and support your show jumping, whereas now it's the main thing I like to focus on. So Eric taught me all of that, which has helped me develop the business.
So you said that you did a couple of different disciplines.
Yes.
How come you went down the show jumping route? Starting off not liking jumping at all.
I know.
How did you develop into where you are now today?
Yeah, so with the show jumping, like I said, I was never interested in competing. I really disliked jumping quite a lot. I found jumping very stressful. Crystal's the one that really got me into jumping. And when I went past the age of 16, I could no longer show jump her in ponies. Because obviously with BS you have the rules of jumping the 14.2s and you have to be under 16. So I actually went down I actually went down the eventing route with her. So we did a bit of British eventing. She evented me up to 100. And I did enjoy eventing, but it wasn't my thing. The dressage was difficult to enjoy on Crystal because she was bouncing off the walls all the time. Like, she would always go double clear, but she wasn't the most fantastic mover on the flat. But again, I had never learned how to properly school a horse, so we were really just like the blind leading the blind at that point. So we were just kind of getting through the dressage to go cross country and show jumping. And we'd always go and watch like Olympia, London International, like all the big show jumping classes each year. And I used to think jump offs looked so exciting. And I just thought, I really want to do that, because you don't have that in eventing. Yeah. Like, you just want to clear around. I thought, I really want to do some of that. So I started doing a bit of just unaffiliated show jumping on Crystal. And I really enjoyed it, and she would sweep up all the prizes. Like, she'd come first in both the classes, and I just thought, oh, this is so fun. And that kind of led me down to wanting to do show jumping. That's when I did with Inky. He'd previously competed BS and had quite a bit of success. So I was like, oh, I want to do proper show jumping, which to me was BS. And we just started British Novice Discovery, like 90 a metre. Which really got me into the show jumping. But I do dabble in a bit of eventing now, just here and there. But show jumping, a lot of eventers I find really don't like the show jumping.
Yeah, every eventer I've spoken to is like their least favourite. Yeah.
Which is so strange. Because although I like a bit of eventing, show jumping's like by far my favourite. I think I've really been influenced by the people I've been around. So I've always been on like show jump yards. So I think that influenced me, and I think it was always fun to go to shows and know people and have friends there, and that kind of like community. When I was eventing Crystal, I didn't really know anybody, and then when I'd go show jumping, I'd see lots of people I know, and that kind of was a huge influence as to why I carried on with the show jumping. But I also found eventing was quite hard for me to train for. Again, I didn't really have an instructor at the time. My dad would work full time, so we couldn't get out anywhere in the week. We could only do weekends. So eventing, you have 3 phases you're training for. It's hard to get them fit when you're not going up the gallops once a week or having flat lessons. I felt very underprepared for eventing. Whereas I found at the time, working on my own at the yard, show jumping was much more accessible for me to train for. So that's another reason why I kind of went down that route. But I think just more opportunities came up for me show jumping wise when riding. Sorry, I'm literally dying. When riding other people's horses, I'd always get sent show jumpers in. So it kind of just naturally directed me down that route. But I do love my hunting and team chasing. Like, that's another reason why I liked the eventing. I love the cross country, and which is why I picked up going team chasing, going hunting, so I'd still get that like fun thrill. And it's only really in recent years I've started to enjoy dressage. I didn't appreciate it as a young rider because I found it boring and I didn't know how to school properly, so it was just all too difficult. Whereas now I actually think I enjoy eventing a bit more because I can appreciate the dressage and actually quite enjoy doing dressage now. So I did recently go and do an event the other day, which is my first time eventing since 2019. And I did it on a sales livery, and I had a great time. I had a really fun time, and I thought, oh, I kind of could see myself maybe getting back into eventing again. But it's the same thing. It's difficult to train for. I think eventers can relate to this, especially when you've only got, say, like 1 event a month. You're trying to train, you're trying to get your horses fit, doing fitness, fast work for the cross country, you're trying to keep them careful enough for show jumping, you're trying to develop their flat work to do a nice test. Like, it's a lot to get right in one day, and I admire eventers that do it full time. Like, it is a lot of work, it's a lot to do, especially if you want to compete multiple horses. So when I take out a team of horses to a show jumping, they're doing 1 or 2 classes each, and it's 1 round. Whereas eventing, if you're taking out a team of horses, they all have 3 phases to do. Oh my gosh, it's so much work. Like, 1 horse eventing is a lot of work. I don't know how these people, like, I know you've had Ellie on the pod as well. She's doing like 10 horses in one day. I'm thinking, how are you doing that, girl?
When are you having time to breathe?
Oh my God, how does she remember all the dressage tests? I can only remember 1 dressage test at a time. Like, if they all happened to be in the same section in class, I'd be okay. But all doing a different level on the same day, remembering all the courses, no. So again, been steered down the show jumping route a little bit that way as well. But I think because I work alone a lot and I'm training alone and doing a lot of things myself, show jumping is much easier for me to be able to do individually. And I think a lot of people that compete by themselves will understand that, like, eventing is a lot of work. And with the show jumping as well, like, we have more local venues. You know, we have at least 5 venues like within half an hour from here, whereas eventing is so much more travel, and taking the time off from the yard and the business can be quite difficult at times. So I normally save it for, you know, once a month perhaps we'll go to an away show jumping. I take a week off from the yard, but it's a lot to leave behind. There's lots of things to factor in when you're going out competing. And I just find show jumping is just a little bit easier for me to manage everything, and it's more suitable for the kinds of horses I get sent in. I can take my sales liveries out show jumping. It fits in with my business venture a bit more, but I definitely do enjoy a bit of eventing here and there.
Yeah, you're obviously very successful in the show jumping as well.
Thank you.
I want to know if you have any tips for maybe any younger riders or even older riders who are looking to kind of go from maybe unaffiliated up to the affiliated. Would you have any tips?
Yeah, so making that jump from unaffiliated to affiliated can be a bit scary, because when you're unaffiliated, it's, I think, a little bit more accessible for everyone. So you're having quite a diverse age range when you're unaffiliated. You've got older riders, kids on tiny ponies coming to thrash you. Like I said, there's all sorts of different people there. And I think, don't get me wrong, unaffiliated can be competitive. Like, you'll have a tiny child that's there to win and you have to really up your game. But I think it can be daunting going into BS, because especially as an amateur rider or somebody that isn't from a professional setup, you go into BS with a lot of professionals around you that all know what they're doing, and it can be a little bit daunting at times, especially all the extra rules that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. So my biggest tip for, you know, making that jump from unaffiliated to affiliated is do your own research and don't be afraid to ask questions. So I think people appreciate so much more you asking questions to learn rather than making mistakes. So for example, when I went from unaffiliated to affiliated, I didn't know about left to left in the warm-up, which now is my biggest pet peeve when somebody isn't going left to left, and I used to be that person. So if anybody doesn't know, when you're in a warm-up, it might not be so prevalent unaffiliated, though you should be doing unaffiliated as well. But in a BS warm-up, it's very, very strict. You have to pass left to left. So if you're on the left rein, the horse coming the other way is going to be on your left side. So on the left rein, you're on the outside track. People on the right rein are on the inside track. And this just prevents collisions, crashes, all bad situations. And perhaps unaffiliated, you have a little bit more leeway, especially as there's lots of children on ponies that don't have a lot of steering. But in BS, you will get shouted at if you upset a professional warming up their horse. And it can be a little bit scary, I think, for people that are new to it and feel that there's lots of things they need to remember, and colours of ribbons on horses. What does this ribbon mean? What does this mean? And I would just say your best friend is social media. You can ask people questions. And I think on Facebook especially, you can ask these questions in the Facebook groups, and I think there can be people that can be really helpful. Obviously, social media does have its downsides, but I think you need to find the good in it, because I've learned so much just from asking people questions. Literally sometimes just taking to the Facebook BS group and going, what does this mean? What does this entail? How do I qualify for this? How do I learn about this? And sometimes it can be a bit more easier to hear it in somebody's own words than going to the
reading
BS
a rule book.
You just think, oh my God, there's so much information here.
So overwhelming.
What do I do? Whereas actually, if someone can like almost dumb it down for you and speak to it in like their perspective, it's like easier to understand. So yeah, definitely ask questions, find out as much information as you can. and just enjoy it. I think it can be a scary step, but it's also really fun.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lovely community in show jumping. Everyone's really trying to stick together. And when you get to go to these away shows and you see people you know and everyone's helping out, it's a really nice community. And I think it's very enjoyable. If you're brave enough to get into it, it's really worth it.
Yeah. I want to dive into your social media a little bit.
Yes.
And how that all started.
Oh, okay. So Crystal was the starter for social media. So I started posting a little bit on Instagram when I was like 11 or 12. Just like grainy photos of my pony. Just for fun. Everyone at school had Instagram, so I thought, I've got to get it too. And Crystal started to pick up a bit of traction because once I'd got past the point of being terrified of riding, Crystal started, I think she grew with me. She started off very, very steady and sensible, and then she turned into a slightly neurotic little thing. But it was enjoyable for me as I got more confident, and Crystal would have the odd little rear, which I think a lot of people say is why I have Eric now, because Crystal was the baptism of fire with Crystal. She just started rearing one day. When she got excited, she'd like try and shoot forward and I'd stop her and then she'd just go up. So I just found it quite fun. So I would get lots of videos of when we went for a canter hack in the field, Crystal would get really excited and we'd get a video of her rearing and then cantering off. And those sorts of videos would suddenly start getting lots and lots of views. And I'd have loads of likes and comments and I'd be thinking, oh my gosh, where did all these people come from? And people started just following me for Crystal. It was all Crystal. They weren't interested in me. Because Crystal was just such a fun, iconic little pony, and I started doing a bit of the YouTube videos as well alongside the Instagram. And Crystal started to become relatively famous for when I took her hunting. I had a GoPro on and she would just bolt off with me the whole time. But it was kind of in a funny way. I wasn't scared because it was Crystal. But she'd overtake the hunt master. And this one video where of her overtaking the hunt master, and anyone that doesn't hunt, that's a big no-no. You never overtake the hunt master. Everyone found this video absolutely comical of Crystal just shooting past the hunt master and me shouting sorry as I disappear into the distance. So people thought that was so funny, and I thought, okay, I'll start doing more videos of Crystal being Crystal, because for us that was just her little antics and everybody else seemed to really enjoy it. So I started wearing the GoPro when I'd go on sponsored rides. So we do this one sponsored ride every year, and Crystal became famous at this ride because in the collecting ring before you set off, she'd get really excited and start rearing, and you'd be like, oh look, it's that grey pony again that's here rearing, and it's oh yeah, that's me. So we'd get a picture or a video of her doing that, and it would go viral on Instagram, and people would think it was so funny and fun. And I started doing bareback jumping with her and bareback riding, and people would be like, well, how are you riding that pony bareback? And she's rearing and galloping around and zooming off, and I just oh well, it's just fun. So we did all of that, and it all got hyped up to, I think a big social media moment for us was when we did that Berry Farm bareback challenge back in 2019. We did the bareback challenge, and at that point the bareback challenge was the it thing to do each year.
I feel still now everyone's
is obsessed with it. You've got thousands of people watching on Clip My Horse. They have I think they can seat 600 or 700 people at Berry Farm, and they'd always sell out. It would be jam packed in there. And I remember watching it a couple of
You're okay.
I remember watching it a couple of years prior and watching lots of people fall off, and I used to think, me and Crystal could do this. I never fall off when I do bareback on her, and I always wanted to do it. And the one year we took her in 2019, and we'd been doing loads and loads of bareback practice. I took this really seriously. This was prepping for Hoys, the bareback challenge. I've been doing bareback for weeks leading up to this. I was there to do it. And we were on this strict regime. I was schooling bareback, I was jumping back, I was doing everything bareback ready for the bareback challenge. And we went, and I had a few of my friends there competing as well. And with the bareback challenge, you don't always get picked for it. So they have a ballot. So lots of people enter every year, obviously, and they have to just choose a certain amount of people. And I remember thinking, everyone would say, if they know who you are, you're more likely
Yeah,
to
you got a
get
better
picked.
chance.
So I was like, oh my God, right. So I was posting, Berry Farm was sick of me. I was posting like
At
weeks
Berry Farm,
leading up
at Berry
to
Farm.
weeks leading up to it. I'm like getting ready for the bareback challenge at Berry Farm on Instagram. Please pick me, please pick me. And I'd be like tagging them, me and Crystal at Berry Farm, hoping to get in the bareback challenge at Berry Farm. Like, please choose us. And we got picked, and I was like so happy because I'd like worked so hard for them to like acknowledge who we were. I was like, please know who we are. Because I thought if we're just another random name, we won't get picked for it. And we did this bareback challenge, and she was awesome. Like, it was just like a fairy tale dream because we were like the last to go. A lot of people had like fallen off or not done particularly well, and my friend Serena was currently in the lead, and she's the one that actually ended up winning it. But it was really, really fun because we'd like prepped together and stuff, and we'd got ready for it. And Crystal came in, and I remember when she first came in the ring, she was making a big fuss, and she was like rearing, and she wouldn't go down the chute to go in the ring, and everyone was waiting for us. And I was like, oh my God, Crystal doesn't want to go in the ring, because she was so excited. And I had to get off and lead her into the ring and then get on in the ring. And then she like reared as I was getting on, because I just like vaulted on her because I was like young and fit back then. I would just like leap on ponies. And someone came like, do you want a leg up? I was like, no. I was like, jumped on. And Crystal reared, and I think it looked like it wasn't going to be a very good round because she was being quite awkward. And I think that just added to the excitement when she like set off, and she was like really, really speedy, and she did everything so well. And then she jumped the biggest joker fence at the end, which was I think 130, which for a little 14-hand pony was quite big. I was a bit scared of that fence. And she cleared it, and it was just like the best moment ever. Like, everyone cheered. It was like, I felt like I was at, at like Hoy's. It felt like the biggest thing ever. Like, I'd never jumped in front of a crowd before. And it was so fun to do on Crystal. But after that, like, the social media like skyrocketed. Like, lots of people watched Berry Farm, and lots of people post about it, and everyone was like, oh, who was that little grey pony? And then lots of people started following us. So that was definitely the start of like the social media. I'd done bits and pieces before then, but Berry Farm Bareback Challenge was like the turning point. It had so many followers in one evening, and it was kind of a bit overwhelming, like to go from this little community of people I sort of knew to like the big wide world of random people. And at the time I was obviously a teenager and didn't really understand the importance of like regulating what you say on doing social media. So I would kind of just like say everything and do whatever, and I'd kind of learn as I go. But I think with social media at that age, it was very difficult because when you've got like a sudden spotlight on you and you don't really know how to act, a lot of people can like pick you apart, and we did get a lot of negativity at that time on social media. I think it's a lot better now. People are a lot more aware. Obviously you still get like younger people still learning about that, but back then it was like a free-for-all. Like, people had no reservations about telling you exactly what they thought. And there was always these like anonymous question app things that people could like leave anonymous questions, and who thought that was a good idea? Honestly, like, I would get so much negativity on there, and I would just keep doing it. I just think I was a glutton for punishment. Like, what are you doing? But I think like I hate focusing on the negative on social media, because obviously there is negative. We're all aware there's negative, but there's so many positives as well. Like, social media has like changed my life completely. I've met some of like the best friends I've ever made in my life through social media. I've been able to work with brands that I never would have worked with because I'm not a professional rider. Like, traditionally, people that get sponsored are professional riders, and you have to be competing at the top level. And having social media kind of opens those avenues for like regular people like me to be able to work with brands and do these campaigns and like do really exciting things and get invited to things. And it's just really, really cool that like regular people get to do that sort of stuff. So I think that's a really important thing to focus on. And the reality is like anybody can do it.
Yeah,
like,
do you have any tips for anyone?
Yeah, so I think with social media, it's like find your niche. I think lots of people want to do social media now. I was lucky to get in kind of back in the days where it was still quite new, like equestrian influencing was still quite new, especially on Instagram. So whereas now, like, everybody wants to be
Yeah.
an influencer now. So it's find your niche. What makes you different from everybody else? Like, for me at the time, it was I did loads of bareback riding, and that just quite caught people's eye, and I had this crazy little pony that caught people's eye as well. And then following on from that, Eric was quite unique. Like, he brought a lot of attention. But I think it's just try and be creative and find a way to stand out. You don't have to be competing at high level to be able to build a social media following. Like, there's so many big social media people that either don't compete or compete at an amateur level. Like, you don't have to jump big fences to be important on social media. And I think that's really nice that you can have a bit of everyone. I think actually it's more relatable if people are at an amateur level and your audience are amateur riders. I think it's much more easier to connect with people. So yeah, just find what makes you different and really like feed into that and just be creative with it. Like, don't be embarrassed about posting things. Like, now, like, I know you've had like Demir on the pod and stuff. So he obviously, we're friends with Demir. He posts his funny little skits and stuff. And obviously there's lots of people that I've met that have said, oh, those videos are so cringe. And I just think, look how successful he is.
Yeah, he's found a really nice
Don't be
niche.
embarrassed about doing those things, because he's now one of the biggest equestrian influencers on TikTok, because he's not afraid to be himself and create those little videos. And it's, well, all these people that go, oh, that's really cringe. Well, what are you doing that's successful? I think, like, there's no need to be like that. If it's not your niche, that's fine. But yeah, don't feel like other people's opinions are going to stop you from doing something like that. Because if he'd never done that because people have said, oh no, that video is cringe, he would never be doing what he does now. And I think it's a great example. So yeah, don't be afraid to do your own thing.
Yeah, I love that. That was great advice.
Right.
I want to know how you balance everything. So you've got your socials, you do your dealing, then you've got your own horses that you compete. What does a day look like for you? How do you balance it all?
Yeah, so I don't have a social life, basically. So it is a lot to do. I'm really dedicated to work. I've always been like a business mindset kind of person. I really, really love my work, and I spend all of my time doing my work, basically. And I enjoy it. I find it very fulfilling. It can be difficult at times to get time off. Like, in this kind of job, working with horses, it's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Horses to be cared for every day.
Yeah, there's no business hours. Like, I made a TikTok recently joking about people ringing me at obscene times, but like, my phone can be ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning, midnight. I've had people ringing me at like 4 a.m, like inquiring about horses. Like, it's just constant.
Yeah, it's just mental though, because do you expect to get a reply at 4 a.m?
Well, I know. If you catch me in a bad mood and you wake me up at 4 a.m, I'm blocking your number. Like, you'll never be inquiring about a horse again. Because I don't sleep very much, so I need my sleep. So if my phone's ringing at 4 o'clock, it's an immediate block. But yeah, it's a lot to deal with on the go. And I think for a lot of people, it's not enjoyable to do this full time, and I completely understand why some people don't want to work in horses, because it kind of takes away from your love for the hobby. But I really do find, for me, it doesn't do that. Like, I love working in horses. I love doing what I love every single day. So I get to work for myself. Having worked for companies and working a regular job previously, I just hated it. I really hated like a 9 to 5 job. It was just never going to be for me. So to be able to work for myself, yes, the hours are long. Yes, I don't have a social life. My friends never see me. I'm always at the yard. But I really love what I do. And I think that's what like gets me up every day to do it. And it's hard work and the days can be long. But I think as long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, I think it just makes it all worth it. But to find a balance, I think it's just organisation. Like, I was never the most organised person. I was kind of forced into being more organised, stepping away from teenagehood into adult life. I was like the most unorganised teenager. I was a nightmare in school, but I was late for everything. Like, you can't be like that though when you're running a business. You can't be late. You have to be contactable and you have to be organised. Like, at the start of the business, I'd make little mistakes, like getting the time of a viewing wrong, and like not leaving enough time between viewings, and you kind of learn as you go. But it is all about being super organized, planning in advance, and just like knowing what your day is going to look like. When you're working with other people, not quite customer service, but you're dealing with, it's like a front-facing role, like you're dealing with people all the time, and you have to portray a certain, you know, level of professionalism. You have to be organised, you have to be on time, things have to be clean and tidy, and you have to leave time to be able to get everything ready. And if I just woke up without any plans for the day, it would be disaster. Like, I have to plan everything the day before, and especially when you're doing like viewings for multiple different horses in one day, you have to be setting up the arena for this horse and this horse and this horse. You just have to make sure your time management is on point, and it can be a tricky thing to learn. I've definitely like developed it along the way. I didn't like come out immediately starting the business with an amazing organisation, that's for sure, but it's just something, it can be hard to have that work and personal life balance, but I think for me, my personal life kind of feeds into work anyway, because horses are my work and personal life. So it's, in some ways it's easier, and sometimes the lines get blurred a little bit, but I enjoy it, so it's worth doing.
I feel like you're going to hate my next question.
Oh no.
I want to know, so this podcast is called Beyond the Stable.
Yeah.
So I want to know what you do beyond the stable. What do you do out with horses? Have we got time for anything?
No. I don't have much I do that's not involved in horses, which is a shame because I used to have lots of other hobbies, and now less so much. So I used to do like a lot of dance and like creative arts, and my mum used to run a theatre school, so I do dabble in a bit still when I have time, but I've always been like very close to creative arts, so like photography, art, dance, drama, all of that sort of thing I used to love doing growing up. And my mum ran a really successful theatre school, like we performed at the Royal Albert Hall and in the West End, and I remember one of the roles I got doing musical theatre, I was in Les Miserables as one of the I know, one of the children. Like, people never know that I've done all that stuff because horses take over, but I managed to do all of that, and I did a bit of acting and stuff. Like, I got the Disney role when I was younger, which set me up for the horses. I did a bit of modelling as a teenager, so I started modelling at 15, and I've walked in London Fashion Week 5 times.
You need to speak about this on your socials.
I don't talk about this anywhere.
Because it's so cool. It's like a totally different side to you that none of us know about.
It's complete opposite, like catwalk modelling and horses. Like, I look like a different person.
They don't clash.
For sure, yeah. It's I actually find the catwalk modelling harder work than doing the horses, because when you're in yard boots every day, then having to spend a 16-hour day in heels is just like a real challenge. But yeah, I've always done a bit of that. Less so now, less so the last couple of years, but I think it was a really, really cool experience to be involved in like London Fashion Week and walking all the shows. Like, it was really intense, doing like a few days, like back-to-back shows. You're working like from crack of dawn to the end of the night, doing fittings, walking the catwalk, going to other fittings, hopping between venues. Like, it's a lot of work, but it was really enjoyable, and I did have the opportunity at one point to pick that up as a job, but I turned it down for horses. So I had the option if I wanted to like move to London and really like get into the modelling full time, but it would require me giving up the horses or just having one horse that I kind of rode every now and then. And I just decided that as much as I enjoyed modelling, my real passion and love was in horses. So that's why I'm now in a state of the yard every day rather than a fancy catwalk model. But it's a really cool thing to have experienced. Like, not a lot of people get to do that, and I feel really lucky that I got to. My mum's always been really involved in like that kind of industry. She's like runs a management company for like talent and models and stuff, so it was really helpful to have that guidance from her. So although she's not horsey, that's her niche. So I got into that with her. But yeah, it was really, really cool, and it's just like it's a fun thing to tell people. They go, what?
Yeah, and I bet all that kind of side of stuff does help with the social media and stuff that you do now.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like, I mean, when I was doing the modelling properly, I was doing it on social media as well, and it was a really great thing to have when you're working with agencies, because you go to a modelling agency, mostly do modelling, do a bit of acting, and they go like, are there any other skills? So it's like, well, I can ride horses.
Here we go.
And I did a couple of roles where like I there was a period of time where I wanted to get into like stunt doubling, of like riding the horses in films and TV shows and stuff like that. And again, it's one of those things that I could have pursued, but I ended up just deciding to work with my own horses at home. But it's been a really, really cool thing to just dabble in every now and then. And it's nice that I know that if I wanted to pick it up again in the future, I could do. But yeah, I mean, now I'm not as interesting now. Like, I don't do the modelling anymore. I don't have time. But I love to like read. I'm a big reader. I've always enjoyed like creative writing. When I went to college, I did a course in creative writing and journalism, and I was set to go to uni for English literature. So my dream as a child was always to be an author. I don't know if I'll ever continue with that dream. I don't have time to sit down and write now, but I used to write books as a child. Like growing up, I'd always be writing. So maybe one day, one day I'll come out with a horse book, but who knows?
No, that's so cool. I didn't know any of that about you. So
I know.
That was amazing to learn all of that. I feel like I've just seen a whole new side to you. My final question is, if I could get anyone on the podcast, who do you think would be an interesting guest for me to have?
Oh, this is really tricky. Because you've had a lot of interesting
Yeah, I've been
already.
very fortunate. Very, very fortunate.
You've been really good. I think... Oh, well, somebody that I know personally, I'll do two people, maybe somebody that I don't know and somebody I know. Somebody I know personally that I think would be really fun to have on is Kate Lewis, who's Blob the Cob. I love her username. Whenever I say that in real life, Blob the Cob, people are always like, okay. It's just such a funny username. Sorry, Kate. But she's a really good friend of mine. She's, I think, a really, really interesting person. Again, she has lots and lots of things she does.
Yeah, guys, I'll let you in on a secret. As we're filming this, the episode isn't out yet, but we have actually filmed with Kate.
Oh my gosh, you didn't tell me. She should have told me. Oh well, coming soon then.
Coming soon, and it was a very good episode.
Okay, I'm psychic. Okay, well, there we go. Plug to the new episode.
Yeah, thanks.
No problem. You have to put mine out first now, so you have the little excitement build up for Kate's episode. And somebody I don't know. I think you should film with... Oh, this is really bad because I don't actually know his name. I'd have to like search his name up. But there's a guy that does loads and loads and loads of the tackless jumping.
Right.
And he had this viral video go recently of him jumping round, I think it was 140, bridleless. And I think interviewing somebody a bit like that would be really, really interesting. Because I think the bridleless and the bitless is becoming a huge thing at the moment that people are doing, and I think it would be really interesting to interview somebody that's quite accomplished with that and to like learn from them,
because you do bits of that as well, don't you?
I do a little bit. I'm still learning as well, but I think it would be really exciting for people to actually find out how to get into that. And yeah, I do bits of it. I dabble. It's been a huge part of Eric's journey to settle him down. He can do bridleless work now, which, you know, looking back
from the start, it's amazing.
Yeah, you wouldn't be wanting to take the bridle off at the start. Ooh, that'd be scary. He's actually a really, really great candidate for it. I think it's an excellent thing to do with if you've got a horse that's particularly anxious. And normally people think, oh God, that's the last kind of horse you'd want to do that with. You know, you'd normally think, oh, I want a really laid back horse to take the bridle off and ride it. But actually, it's really, really beneficial for these more anxious types because Eric specifically really gained his support from the contact on the bit. If you dropped the contact, he would like feel that he was abandoned. And it really helped in him building up his self-confidence. There is no contact on the bit. I'm still here. You can feel I'm still here, but you need to feel confident in yourself to not feel like I'm holding your hand all the time.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to see, because he's quite sensitive in his mouth as well. And we never really found a bit that worked quite perfectly for him. But he didn't enjoy the pressure from a hackamore, because I did try bitless with him. And I just thought, well, maybe he needs the contact to feel safe. And actually, having done the bridleless work, that's not the case at all. He can go bridleless really, really well. He just struggles with pressure. And when you're taking the bridle off, there's no pressure at all. And he really, really enjoys that. And I think I'd hugely recommend anybody with an anxious horse to really try and work into that, because the difference you can find in them, and it really can benefit then your ridden work, because you're developing your horse to listen to your body weight and more subtle cues rather than relying on your rein. I think we all can all be a bit guilty of getting a bit handsy at times and really relying on our reins, and actually taking that away can really fine-tune how you can adjust your body to change what your horse is doing, to slow them down, to sit them up. You don't need the rein to do all those things. So once you've taught them how to do the bridleless work, you notice a huge difference then when you put the bridle back on. You find yourself, you're much softer in your hand. Your horse is actually listening to your body movement a lot more than just listening to your reins and being a little harsh on the hand. It's a really, really great educational step for them. So I hugely recommend for people to give it a go.
Yeah, no, amazing. And you'll need to give me the name of the guy.
I will, I'll find out. I'll find out who it was.
But no, I've absolutely loved speaking to you today. Thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest, and I feel like I've learnt so much and you've inspired me, and it's been great. So thank you. Guys, if you haven't seen Lily before, make sure you go check out her social media. I'll leave it all linked down below. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you guys have watched this on YouTube, then make sure you're subscribing. If you're over on Spotify, make sure you leave me a review. And I'll see you next week for another new episode. Thank you again.
No problem. Bye.